Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really grateful that the panel is here, and obviously have met a lot of the folks that work underneath you, and just have a tremendous amount of respect for the service that they're giving to the country. But I do have a lot of concerns about the policies that we have, a lot of them stemming from the White House, that have caused a lot of harm and that don't represent who we are or our best values. I went down to McAllen, Texas recently, and the first thing I did after landing around midnight was to drive to the port of entry nearby, Hidalgo Reynosa International Bridge, and I crossed over into Mexico, walking in the dark, the length of the pedestrian bridge across the Rio Grande into Mexico. And as soon as I got there, the Mexican officials, the one guy that was there, started warning me about the danger of going further into the town and the community. I'm a big guy, but they were concerned, cuidados, está peligroso, and that wasn't my intention to go into the community. I wasn't going over there as a tourist. I really came back around to walk back in and see how people who were looking to present themselves for asylum were greeted. And I was a bit surprised because as soon as I got there, instead of being at the point of entry, there was folks, 3 Customs and Border Patrol agents that were stationed right there at the middle of the bridge, right on the border. And I had a conversation with them. They didn't recognize me as a United States Senator, but I just had a conversation about why they were posted there, what they were doing, and they basically told me they were turning away people that were presenting themselves for asylum. Again, into that community that I was told that was dangerous. Their job was to prevent asylum seekers from stepping foot on American soil and presenting themselves in the legal manner that our laws say that they are allowed to do. They warned me about my safety, which sort of surprised me. Again, you're turning away children, mothers back into that community that you say is not safe for me. And I wondered about that. It really was difficult for me as an American to see us turning away people trying to seek asylum from being evaluated in a systematic process that I thought existed, and instead being pushed back into a dangerous environment. And so we've all heard these reports of people who are seeking asylum, who attempt to legally claim asylum at ports of entry being turned away, and it's unclear for me exactly why. Is this a space issue, which I've had some great conversations with CBP folks that talk to me about the issue of having enough space. And so I'm wondering, in all of our processes, about how we're prioritizing such that it could reflect our values and keep us safe. I live, one of my colleagues talked about minority communities that see the danger. I live in an inner city. I live in a predominantly African-American community, in a majority African-American city. I have had shootings on my street in the last 2 years. I am concerned every single day about safety in our country. And I think we should be focused on the safety of our citizens. But what I worry about is those folks that pose absolutely no threat whatsoever, that we're not figuring out a way to get our resources focused on our values. Safety first, and making sure that we create legal processes, because with the fact that we're turning people away creates more danger, not just for them and their families, but also pushes more people into breaking the law and getting chewed up into our systems in ways that we don't want to. It's a moral question to me about prioritization. And so my questions real quick are, first of all, I'm wondering, and maybe Mr. Albans, you can answer this, is are you coordinating with Customs Border Patrol to prioritize using beds and resources so that there are resources available for legal asylum seekers instead of using the beds to lock up people who are otherwise law-abiding citizens?
So we do. We manage a diverse portfolio of beds. Obviously, we have our family residential centers. We have adult detention centers. We have a command center in San Antonio that helps manage those beds. We have officers stationed at the CBP command center here in D.C. that helps manage those beds. I have a whole division in headquarters that's solely dedicated to the management of beds. I
guess I'm not talking about the beds you have available. I'm talking about the prioritization. In those beds, you have a lot of people that don't pose a threat. ICE's own data shows, according to their classification system, they describe that more than half of the population in ICE custody are posing 0 community safety risks, according to the National Immigrant Justice Center. So it seems to me that
a lot of those individuals are subject to mandatory detention under the Immigration and Nationality Act. Individuals that are asylum seekers at the POE, unless they are paroled in, are subject to mandatory detention.
When you say that they're individuals, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I have very little more time, but you're saying that some of them are asylum seekers. And so my question is if you are working with CBP can't we be doing more to make sure that there are more beds available for those asylum seekers? Isn't there a better way to prioritize?
We are continually looking to expand our bed capacity. We are generally between 97 and 99% full when it comes to, in terms of our adult beds, but we're always looking to expand capacity. But we would need the funding to do that too.
Right, and that's great because that is a policy issue. But I guess I really worry that, ICE agents have arrested about 4,143 undocumented immigrants without a criminal record each month under this administration. That's a lot of resources going after people and that pose us absolutely no threat. While the concerns of my Republican and Democratic colleagues about people who are posing threats or people who are trying to come here through the legal means who are being turned away and often end up coming through illegal means, gumming up the system, there's got to be a better way to prioritize it. And I actually question what you need Congress's help with. You need Congress's help, perhaps, to provide more resources for beds. And if that's the case, I'm gung-ho to help out with that. But as Senator Leahy said, you call your tip line, and that reflects your priorities right there. I mean, he said that the very first thing they want you to do is report on your neighbor. It's press 1 for reporting suspected undocumented immigrants, not violent people, not terrorists, not gang members. The very first thing. You have to go pretty far down. Terrorism is number 4. I would think that should be number 1, frankly. Reporting crimes against children was number 6. Reporting gang activity is way down at number 8. Now, as a guy who, again, lives in a city with a lot of undocumented immigration, we see that in our cities across America, your prioritization seems to create this chill, this fear. So now the people in my city, they're afraid to report crimes or undocumented immigrants. This prioritization seems problematic. And so, ICE should be in the business of catching criminals, not encouraging Americans to report on their neighbors for possible civil immigration offenses. And it's this prioritization to me that is disturbing, because I actually think, and I've seen this with the drug war in America, we have literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people locked up right now in this country for low-level drug crimes, many of them for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing. Think about those resources that could be used in communities like mine to keep people safe.
Right.
And I'm done now. I just want to ask you the last question. Can't you do a better job prioritizing the people that are threatening our country, as opposed to locking up so many people that pose zero threat? Can't you re-examine your prioritization, that even your tip line, for God's sake, can encourage Americans to help you make us safer and not continue to round up people that take resources away from the really dangerous situations in our country?
I hope you can give a short answer.
I'll do my best. So what I can tell you is that 9 out of every 10 people that we arrest has a criminal conviction or has been charged with a criminal offense. I can tell you that the aggregate number of convicted criminals that we've arrested has risen for the past 2 years. So we do prioritize, but at that same point, when we encounter individuals that are here unlawfully during the course of our enforcement actions, prioritizing those public safety threats, we are not going to turn a blind eye to them. The other largest group of individuals that we arrest are individuals who have already had their day in immigration court, have exhausted due process, and are fugitives, meaning they've ignored the judge's order, or there's somebody that's been previously arrested and deported and has returned in the country, which, as you know, sir, is a felony. So 92% of the people we arrested last year fell into those categories. And if I could answer and it's going to be speculations, I don't know because the tip line doesn't fall under me, but we've been working with the tip line to prioritize and categorize the types of calls that come in there. And ERO, which does the civil enforcement aspect, has been working with the tip line. Again, I'm speculating, but I'm thinking they're doing that so that they can move those cases over to ERO for referral, while HSI keeps the other categories because they have responsibility for those. Well, but I will find out and get back with you.
A question for the record, if I can, because that doesn't jive with the data.
Please make it quick.
The QFR for the record is just simply, if that is true, then why does his own data show that half the people that he's detaining pose absolutely no threat whatsoever? That doesn't sound like to me you're prioritizing your resources for public safety at all. In fact, that you're creating more safety hazards because you're creating chills and fears amongst immigrant communities to actually report crimes and work with local police. So I'd like that for the record.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your patience in being here, and thank you for the service of the many men and women who diligently seek to enforce our laws. Let me ask this panel, who here thinks that zero tolerance has been a success? You can just raise your hand if you think it's been a success. Who thinks that the family separation policy has been a success? Raise your hand. Who here can tell me who is responsible? Which public official, which member of this administration is responsible for zero tolerance and family separation?
They probably can't answer that or they'll get fired.
Can anyone tell me? Who's responsible? Nobody knows?
The zero tolerance prosecution policy, the memorandum, was issued by the Attorney General on April 6, 2018.
So the official responsible for zero tolerance is the Attorney General of the United States, acting presumably with the approval of the President of the United States, correct?
He is the one who issued the memorandum on April 6, 2018. It's an extension of an earlier memorandum he issued in 2017.
Did anyone, any member of this panel, say to anyone, maybe this isn't such a good idea? Commander?
During the deliberative process over the previous year, we raised a number of concerns in the ORR program about any policy which would result in family separation due to concerns we had about the best interest of the child, as well as about whether that would be operationally supportable with the bed capacity we had.
Now, I'm going to translate that into what I would call layman's language. You told the administration that kids would suffer as a result, that pain would be inflicted, correct?
Separation of children from their parents entails significant risk of harm to children.
Well, it's traumatic for any child separated from his or her parents. Am I correct? I say that as a parent of 4 children.
There's no question that separation of children from parents entails significant potential for traumatic psychological injury to the child.
And would I be correct in assuming that the answer to you was, in effect, that's the whole purpose of the policy, to inflict pain so as to deter asylum seekers from coming here, correct?
No, sir, we were advised that family separation was not the policy.
Family separation just happened to result from zero tolerance without anybody knowing in advance, even though you raised the concern, correct?
Yes, we raised concerns about the effect on children as well as the effect on the program.
And what was the answer?
At no time during the time that I was in ORR was there an actual policy announcement of family separation. It was merely a discussion of possible future consequences.
So there was awareness that it would be the consequence, correct? You raised it.
I did raise it.
And I'm asking again, what was the answer?
The answer I received is that that family separation was not a policy. That there was no policy that was going to result in family separation.
It would be a consequence of the policy, but
correct.
Not the policy.
No, that I was advised that there was no policy which would result in separation of children from family units.
Are you satisfied with the amount of care and counseling that is being provided to these children to deal with the trauma and the pain of their separation from their parents?
Yes. The children in ORR care each have a mental health clinician.
Well, I know they each
receive
have a mental health
services.
clinician. Are you satisfied that they are receiving sufficient care, or do you believe that maybe those clinicians are overworked, overburdened, that there should be more of them?
I believe that children are receiving sufficient care.
Let me ask whether anyone here has authority to end the appeal of Judge G's decision that the Flores settlement should be continued. Does anyone here have that authority?
The Department of Justice makes the litigation decisions. I personally wouldn't have that authority, but the department would.
And can you commit to me that there will be reconsideration of the department's decision that Flores should be sustained?
As I indicated in response to a prior question, the department is considering its options in light of the most recent ruling.
What are the number of children under 5 who have been reunified?
Sir, I don't have that number with me, I'm sorry.
Is it less than the full number of 102, I think it was, that were separated?
Yes, sir, some minors could not, were not eligible for reunification. They couldn't safely be reunified.
Do you know the number?
I don't know the number, although I'm sure we have it and can provide it.
And of those 431 total, how many eventually of them do you expect will be reunified?
You're referring to the total of the minors whose parents have been removed from the United States?
Correct. Is there any prospect that they will be reunified? And what number?
There's no way that I could say what number it will be because it hasn't happened yet. We are working on strategies to effect reunifications for all of the eligible ones. A number of parents may elect that their children remain in the United States.
When parents are put in detention facilities, are they permitted to retain their telephones, their cell phones?
Not at the facility itself, no.
How do children reach their parents?
I can speak to our capabilities at the detention facilities. Commander White spoke with very well about the process they utilized. Our individuals are allowed phone calls during the course of their detention. We have a contractor that provides low-cost, if not free calls. Once an individual is booked in, they always get a free 5-minute call domestically or internationally. We have worked very closely with Commander White's people during the course of this process to ensure that communication occurs on a routine and regular basis. They've surged resources to our facilities to help facilitate that communication.
I'm going to finish because my time has expired. I just want to say that there is now total consensus on both sides of the aisle that this zero tolerance and family separation policy, and it has been a policy, as you indicated, Commander, it was clearly foreseeable as a consequence of zero tolerance. It was part and parcel of the policy to inflict pain so as to deter asylum seekers from coming to this country. Now, we have it at the highest levels because General Kelly himself and other top officials indicated that deterrence was an objective. And it constitutes, as I have said, kidnapping or child abuse. And ultimately, I hope that there's a lesson here. But right now, there seems to be no prospect for reunifying many of the children who are still separated from their parents. And I welcome any response, either now or in writing, depending on whether the chairman will
Do it in writing. Senator Harris.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you know, it is clear that the folks that are before us now are not the shot callers. They are following orders. They are carrying out a policy that clearly was not of their own making. I was heartened that when Senator Blumenthal asked the question, eliciting anyone to raise their hands in defense of this policy that was about separating children from their families, none raised their hands. And that being said, I believe that we need to call this policy what it is. It is a policy that is about the United States government committing a human rights violation. And I will repeat what I have said weeks ago. I believe that those who called and created this policy and implemented it, including Secretary Nielsen, should step down, because this has been a policy that has not only wreaked havoc, it has, for probably the entire rest of the lives of the children who have been affected, will cause them harm and damage. That being said, Commander White, as of today, what is the current number of parents outside of the country who were separated from their children and have yet to be reunified? And please don't give me the number 431, because that was the number from last Thursday.
So, ma'am, we don't have the parents, we have the children, but I'll talk to you about the number of children who have parents departed. 81 of those children have been discharged, and 429 children remain in care whose parents have departed the United States.
And what is the deadline by which we are, and that you are, going to reunify those children with their parents? Is there a deadline in place?
My team is working to effect those reunifications.
Is
Frankly,
there a deadline in place?
we do not presently have, to my knowledge, a deadline in place. 3 different federal district courts are now involved in what we can do and what we must do.
Don't you believe that that we should be held accountable to ensuring that all means necessary are put in place to ensure that these children are reunified with their parents, and there should be a deadline set to make the urgency of the matter clear to all involved?
Ma'am, it is absolutely my heartfelt conviction that we must reunify those children with their parents. Yes,
Will
ma'am.
you commit to creating a deadline by which that should happen?
The deadlines will be imposed by courts, and we will execute them. My preferred deadline for my team is absolutely as quickly as humanly possible.
Are you saying that you don't have the authority to create a deadline?
I'm saying that if I could have reunified all those children with their parents by yesterday, it would be done. We are operating under, we are operators and work within the world of what is actually operationally achievable.
Are you under a consent decree?
I'm sorry?
Are you under a consent decree by the court?
I'm going to have to defer to DOJ to characterize our current legal situation.
And what efforts, if any, is the government making to provide phone and video contact between these families while they are in detention facilities?
So as we indicated, for the children in our care, we work to provide them with unimpeded access with phones to contact their parents.
Is it a policy that that they are not to be charged to make these phone calls? You're aware that there's an expense associated with making those calls.
No.
Who pays that expense?
Minors who are in OR care, when they call family members, whether those minors have been separated or otherwise, those calls are paid for under the appropriation that Congress provides for the UAC program. That is part of the care of the child.
What about the calls that the parents make to their children? Who pays for those calls?
If they are in one of the facilities that has access to our free platform, then those calls are at no cost to the individuals. If not, the individual will have a minor cost associated with that call, depending who that individual is calling. Calls of family members, emergency situations are not charged. Calls upon booking into a facility, transferring facilities are not charged.
Have you visited the Otay Mesa detention facility in California?
I may have been to Otay once. I'm not positive.
I've been there.
I think I've been there once.
And I've met with the parents there. And I was told by the people who are running that facility, who most are contract workers, that the calls that those parents would make to their children are free. However, when I sat with the mothers who are at that detention facility and asked them, I found out that they're being charged 85 cents a minute for those phone calls. I further found out when visiting that detention facility that when those parents are there and perform labor, such as cleaning toilets or doing laundry, they are paid $1 a day. Are you familiar with that policy or practice?
Many of the individuals that are in ICE custody are eligible to apply and work in a voluntary work program. It's not mandatory. It's voluntary if they choose to do so. Many do choose to do so just to pass the time while they're awaiting their hearing or their removal.
Do you think people voluntarily choose to clean toilets to pass their time? Is that what you're saying?
I can say that we have a large number of individuals within our custody that volunteer to work on the work program. Details,
To
yes.
clean toilets? Sir, is that what you're saying?
I don't know every task that these individuals are assigned, but again, it's voluntary.
So are you familiar with a practice, at least at that detention facility, that is to pay the detainees $1 a day for labor performed in that facility?
I'm not particularly familiar with that facility. I can certainly find out when I get back.
Please do, and if you could report back to this committee. How many pregnant women have been detained since January in any facility being run by your agency?
I don't have since January. I can give you the fiscal year number year to date, which would be as of July 21st, and that's 1,395.
And what is the policy in terms of transferring them to a less restrictive facility, if there is such a policy, based on the term that they are in their pregnancy, and in particular around the third trimester? Is there a policy?
Yes, ma'am. We do have a policy regarding pregnant detainees and their care. Its policy was changed last year to comply with the President's executive orders. In practice, the only effective change is that no longer are pregnant women given the presumption of release. We'll look at every case on a case-by-case basis.
Which was the previous administration's policy, to allow pregnant women to be in a less restrictive detention facility.
They'd be less restrictive, or which we still utilize, or sub are released. So the number of pregnant detainees that we have right now is not vastly larger than it was in the past 2 years.
But the conditions and terms by which they are detained is vastly different, as you said, in terms of the policy change.
No, we're using the same detention facilities now that we were using in 2015, 16, 17. We utilize the detention facility.
No longer with the presumption, as you've said.
No presumption of release. No presumption of release. Correct, ma'am.
Right. And then I've heard of at least 2 cases recently where women were going into labor while they were in detention. Are you familiar with those cases?
I'm not.
And what protocol is being followed or has been promulgated for women who are going into labor while at your detention facilities? I'm also concerned, are they being accompanied by ICE officers to a hospital, or are they, is the anticipation that they will give birth in a detention facility? And do you have any policies in place regarding them being shackled? Do you know of any of that?
Yes, so our policy with regard to shackling, it's in our PBNDS 2011, that we do not shackle women that are in active labor.
What does active labor mean?
Well, they're in labor, ma'am. But if they're 6 months pregnant and not in labor, then that would not be active labor.
So is there a policy regarding pregnant women being shackled if they're not in active labor?
I'd have to look exactly to see what it specifically says. There are times when an individual is being transported where they would need to be handcuffed for their own safety, as well as the safety of the officers and the other inmates that are detainees that are being transferred. Absolutely.
Okay, if you can follow up on the number of women that are in their third trimester who are currently housed in your detention facilities, I'd appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before I say meeting adjourned, thank you all very much for participating. We hopefully answered a lot of questions. You'll probably get questions for answer in writing. Some of you have received them orally already. There'll be a week for members to submit questions. Hopefully you'll get the answers back just as soon as you can. And we thank you very much for your participation and your authority that you have. Meeting adjourned.